Hey everyone, I have a really exciting guest today. She runs a smaller YouTube channel like mine, and I noticed a lot of overlap in what we discuss. We're going to get into near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, energy healing, and other interesting stuff, so stick around, all right? Hey good people, I'm Derek London. Thanks for checking out my channel. Around here we talk about everything law of attraction. We discuss a lot about the psychological, scientific, and rational basis for subscribing to this philosophy of mine. And in fact, if your reality could stand some change for the better, you have only to start there, with your mind. Hit that subscribe button and settle in, because your life will never be the same. Hey peeps, thanks as always for dropping by. I'm so happy to introduce Lily Evans today. Lily is a sociologist, a teacher, skincare junkie, workout fanatic, former therapist, and beauty lover. She talks about spirituality, esoteric concepts, conspiracy theories, and other fun things. So I'm always keeping an eye open for interesting people to chat with on YouTube. I suppose what stood out to me about your content, Lily, was how intelligent and forthright you are on subjects that, I mean, let's face it, they take a certain touch or finesse to talk about, right? To start with, the law of attraction is one of them. Speaking from personal experience, it's hard to discuss such things so as not to seem as like a glassy-eyed mystic or anything like that. You also get into out-of-body experiences or OBEs, near-death experiences, NDEs, numerology, the Mandela Effect, simulation theory, reincarnation, and many, many other topics. What drew me in right away was how you present these stories not in any dogmatic fashion, but just with a sense of curiosity and adventure. And it's exactly with that kind of open-mindedness I encourage everyone watching to approach these subjects. Like, when did you start getting into these sort of topics?
That's a really great question, and thank you so much for hosting this interview today.
Of course, nice to have you.
Thank you. And my interest in the subject started from a really young age, and I would say that the instance or the kind of situation that set it off was I have had psychic dreams for many, many years now. And
really?
the one that I had was at the age of 7. And so I had a psychic dream, and I was actually working with a child psychologist and therapist at the time. And so I would tell them about these kind of paranormal events and psychic dreams and dreams in general, and kind of just talking with them. And at 7 years old, my therapist had a collection of books about dreams and dream work and out-of-body experiences and kind of the parapsychology. So this therapist was able to actually give me one of her personal books. And even though I was 7 years old, I was reading through this book, and it was talking about different dreams and nightmares from a clinician's point of view about how to treat it, and different obstacles and things like that. So that's where it really started. Is I had this interest in science, and having worked with these mental health professionals from a younger age. And so I was always interested in things like Harry Potter and magic and mysticism, but it also was tempered too with information from psychologists and therapists and other people in my personal life as well. So it kind of started there, and I've always been really big into reading and researching. And so that kind of Harry Potter mysticism and esotericism kind of got me wrapped into the psychology of how certain things happen to certain people and paranormal experiences. And that led me kind of into a rabbit hole of numerology and astrology and tarot cards and a whole lot of different things. But I always came from a more psychological and scientific point of view. So it's kind of merging those two worlds together. And even though they don't seem like they would go hand in hand, a lot of the times they can fill in missing gaps for each other. And I just find it fascinating.
Oh, I'd imagine so. And so your therapist wasn't dismissive about these experiences you were having then?
No, not at all.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, when you got into psychology and so on, sociology, as you were going to university, what was the overall kind of view that you got from them towards parapsychology and some of the spooky stuff that you're talking about?
Yeah, so I have my degrees in psychology and sociology, and originally I was just going to do psychology. And then I took a class on sociology, and I thought that they were really similar and interesting. And they both have interesting points of view about these kind of subjects. And psychology, the kind of main takeaway from psychology is whatever someone is experiencing is true and valid for them. So,
Mhm.
someone's point of view or the experience that they have about a paranormal event or some kind of event that can't traditionally be explained by science, it still has a value and a merit because that person is experiencing it on some level. So with psychology, kind of understanding is going into the science of why that person is having that experience. So psychology often deals with conducting experiments about things that can be recorded, but oftentimes it will include things that cannot be recorded, such as like parapsychology or extrasensory perception. They do a lot of studies like that, and they can't always say why things happen, but it is interesting to note the kind of commonalities that happen throughout different experiments in different cultures and different time periods. So I feel like psychology was inclusive of these events, these kind of parapsychological events. However, they never say if it's true or false per se, but it's kind of something that they're working with all the time to find better experiments to try and quantify these things like the concept of the soul, which we can't fully quantify in science or psychology. So psychology kind of brings in what people experience and that being valid for them, but it also ties in things like, is it possible that that person has some mental health disorder that they're dealing with? Like the concept of ghosts and things like that. Is that person actually seeing a ghost? Or are they having some kind of delusional state in which they believe they're seeing a ghost? But either way, looking at the brain scans, people believe that they're seeing what they're seeing for whatever reason. So it tries to get down to the point of how that can be. Um, so I would say that's how psychology operates. And then sociology is not exactly the same in looking at the brain structures and the biochemistry of the human body. It's more of the scientific study of people and their traditions around the world. So sociology combines more of the practice of looking at different religions throughout the world, looking at accounts of reincarnation, looking at different practices of witchcraft or shamanism. And it talks more about the cultural perceptions that people have and the importance and how that shapes their lives and society. So it's not so much looking at the actual science of how something is happening and the kind of structures of the brain, but more so about the importance that it holds in people's life and how that dictates their life.
Mhm. It's got to be kind of, I would think, especially because you're a subject of this sort of thing. You've had these experiences. Uh, Did you ever find it frustrating learning about these things that it's like, yes, in order to pronounce it as true and in the real world, we need empirical, methods and ways of verifying it. But on the other hand, these things are as real as can be, to your own perception and sensibility. Like, did you ever find that crossroad uncomfortable or frustrating going through all of this?
A little bit in some ways. Like, for example, there was a time that we were in a psychology class and we were talking about dreams, and people were talking about the importance of dreams and the symbolism of dreams and repression that happens in dreams and certain things being stored in dreams. And the teacher that we were working with was really open minded. And I remember asking a question in a freshman class, And I said basically, like, can you explain precognition dreams or psychic dreams where you have a dream about a certain event and then it happens? And so the teacher really didn't have an answer for that. And so they were interested and they're asking me questions. And so it turned into a class dialogue. But it is interesting because that teacher was really open-minded and they were willing to talk about it. Although some teachers, I would imagine, and other teachers I've had in the past, would not be open to that kind of discussion because it's too theoretical. There's maybe not a tie-in to the material that we're learning about, or they don't have that information. So for a lot of academics, if they don't know about a subject or they're not comfortable with it, with their personal biases or beliefs, then it can be a little bit taboo. And I find for the most part, when I talk to people about these kind of subjects like psychic dreams, a lot of people are really interested and they believe in what I'm saying, but it's one of those things where I don't have the actual physical proof to show them other than my own, account of it, or my family members who can testify on my part, like it's one of those things that is hard to prove. So I can see where some frustration can come into that.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. And we're definitely going to be getting more and more into those aspects. I think probably just as a good way to start here, to introduce both of our audiences, it might be a good place to begin with our greatest point of agreement and overlap in content, the law of attraction. What does LOA mean to you? Like, how do you use it in your life? What is its relationship to science, in your opinion?
That's a really good question with a lot of different facets to it. And basically, the way that I look at the law of attraction and the way that I try and explain it to other people is that it's a concept of whatever you focus on and put more energy towards, you'll notice those kind of things reoccurring in your life. So if you consider yourself to be a more positive person and you're looking for more positives in your life, and you have more of an open-minded disposition, you're going to find that those kind of things come to you with more positivity. Kind of the things that you are wanting to manifest into your life, you'll be more open-minded towards. And if you have more of a half glass situation where you're more of a pessimist, you're going to see the world through a more negative point of view. You might have a lower self-esteem and not believe that you're capable of doing whatever the thing is that you're working on. So the law of attraction and the connection to science is interesting because with the view of traditional science, it's seen as pseudoscience a lot of the time because correlation and causation is a really big thing in science, where something has to be able to be experimented on, different variables have to be played with, something has to be repeated so many number of times for it to be true. And for the law of attraction and science, if I say to you, well, I wrote this manifestation down in my journal and that's what caused it to come true. We can't prove that me writing just one sentence. But my point of view about the law of attraction in connection to science is that I see it in more terms of positive psychology. So positive psychology really maintains that if you have a high self-esteem, if you are able to visualize the goal that you want to work towards, if you're able to make a plan of, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this, if you take inspired action, so you kind of have the feeling that you want to create and you have a general plan and you take baby steps and you work towards it, that's how I incorporate the law of attraction into my life. And I think it's slightly a differing point of view to say the movie The Secret. The Secret, that movie kind of says, if you want a red bicycle, all you have to do is think about the red bicycle and you will receive it in some magical, mystical way. It will show up to your door, no work required on your part. And I think that takes a lot of trust and belief to be able to think that you just make an order to the universe and it shows up. But in my opinion, and the way that I use the law of attraction and talk to other people about it, is that you have the idea of wanting the red bike, you look through the magazine, you find that bike, maybe you have a conversation with someone else and say, I'm looking for this bike. Have you seen any or know of any good deals or any good sales going on? Or maybe you take a look at your own finances and you think, I'm going to cut back on this certain area of finance for this month, and I'm going to make a saving plans to get that bike. And then that's kind of where the ball gets rolling, is to make this plan and to have a belief of, I will have this bike. I'm not sure when, I'm not sure how, but it will come to me. So I like to take more of an action oriented approach rather than just sitting back and letting it totally happen on its own.
Yeah. And I'm exactly the same way, actually. That was something I think that probably stood out to me when you were talking about the law of attraction. Is on YouTube, there's so many people kind of like on either end. People are, people who are so much on the rationalist end that don't even consider the law of attraction a philosophy. They just think, oh, that's just mystical BS, right? But then on the other hand, you have people who are fairly kind of center, but then you have these mystics on the other hand that are exactly like what The Secret are talking about, that, just pray and hope and everything's going to happen. When it comes to OBEs and NDEs and the Mandela Effect, these topics that you talk about, does it actually constitute a belief system in your life, or are they just kind of intellectual fascinations?
That's a great question. I think I'll start with OBEs. And just in general, I find these topics to be super fascinating. And the reason that I have my channel is to be able to really objectively talk about these different subjects in a more educational way, so other people can know about them that are interested. And so with out-of-body experiences, I think that they are super fascinating, and I've never had one before. And it's kind of the intersection again between psychology and the kind of paranormal, because out-of-body experiences can be a significant factor in some kind of mental disorders. However, for some people, if they do shamanic journeying or astral traveling, or some people even believe that we do astral traveling while we're sleeping. So it kind of combines those different points of view of the world about matter versus the more intricate workings of the mind and what it's able to produce. So I think it's a combination of different things. And I think it's really quite healthy to think about both of those things, to incorporate spirituality with the physical worlds, because that's how a lot of people make sense of the environment that we're in, to be able to tie in their own human experience with the things that they're actually able to see. And I think that also ties into near-death experiences too, because that is a combination of the biological process of dying, where when someone passes on and their body creates and releases DMT, the chemical which causes these kind of hallucinations. On one hand, someone could say that a near-death experience would be only from the biological point of view of someone releasing DMT and them having auditory and visual perceptions that are different. Whereas someone may say that that might be their soul departing their body and that they're going on to a different realm and able to connect with their spirit guides and other things like that. So I think it's interesting to look at it with both sides. And it's just such a wide field, really, to look into.
Yeah, it is. So if I were to pin you down, and I know if this is too personal, you don't have to answer it. Would you come down on one side or the other? Like, do you think that we have a soul? Do you think that there's something beyond the empirically verifiable realm of experience and being?
I would say yes. And that's kind of my gut feeling, and also the personal experiences that I've had with the kind of paranormal. So of course I have to address my own bias of having had these experiences for myself. with the dreams and other things like that, not out of body and not near-death experience. So I have to say that I'm more open-minded to other people that have had those experiences. And of course, being interested in the subject, I do a lot of research about it. And as far as science ties into it, I think science can be very supporting of these ideas. Like, you can find a lot of scientific studies about near-death experiences with historical accounts throughout time, throughout different locations, with different people, and they all have a thread of commonality with a lot of different things like life reviews or meeting spirit guides or being able to see things that are not there. So I think that it is something that you can tie into science, but also have your own point of view about as well.
Yeah, yeah, I like that answer because, as you mentioned earlier, with kind of the approach that psychology takes towards people when they're having experiences, you always take the subject's report as being accurate. You know, people generally aren't out to deceive anybody or anything like that. So I think that that's a good approach to have to these sort of things. Scientifically, I think there are very few speculations that can account for having distant knowledge, such as what is reported in OBEs, like with remote viewing, for example. You brought up how people have been how people have been clinically dead on the operating table and have seen items on shelves they could have had no knowledge of. There are other accounts of patients remembering conversations that were had nowhere near their bodies, sometimes on the other side of the planet even. I mean, what in the world could possibly make sense of those kinds of anomalies? And I know you're going to be careful how you answer this, but like marrying that with an empirical view, do you have any theories on that? Like, what would explain it?
That's a good question as well. I think that my answer will be partly influenced by the scientific texts and books that I've read about the subjects. For example, there is a book all about near-death experiences, and it pretty much breaks down hundreds of cases from around the world where this psychologist had a lifetime career of doing near-death experience work, and he did it all across the globe for like over 40 years, and I'm blanking on the name and the name of the scientist. However, if anyone's interested in that, they can reach out to me and I'll find out the name of the book. But there are so many accounts and details of that. And basically, the scientist was saying how it was just such a wide collection of data, but they couldn't explain how people had these experiences. So it really is fascinating because the level of proof or kind of evidence that people bring to these different stories varies. Like for near-death experiences, some people, mostly children, it was a lot of children that they worked with, and they have different theories of why that might be with children. They think maybe it's because they were more recently on the other side or more recently in their past life, and that they haven't been subjected to cultural influences as much, saying that it's fake, so that they're more open-minded with maybe repressed memories of a past life that they've had. But the kind of evidence that has been collected really varies, with some kids being able to talk about their extensive family history. They're able to remember the town that they lived in. They're able to take their current family members to the town where they lived in. They're able to identify where their past body was buried. They're able to take them on a tour of the city that they lived in with no maps at a really young age. They're able to blindly identify a family member or some other close relative from a lineup. They're able to just give a lot of information that otherwise they wouldn't have. And I find that really interesting, especially in cases of these kind of accounts happening in third world countries, where these kids are not able to jump on their iPhone and, you know, pull up a map of where they're wanting to go. They just have that feeling and are able to be led to those kind of things. So I would say Also, in terms of near-death experiences, that there are some explanations I think that researchers might be able to come up with, and I think some of them might have to do with bias. For example, if someone has a history of heart disease and they have cardiac arrest, a heart attack, and then they end up in a cardiac arrest unit in the hospital, and they have to be they have to receive something like CPR or a defibrillator. It's very possible that this kind of routine medical emergency, that when they come back from having their near-death experience, that they would be able to speculate on the kind of events that traditionally take place. So if they had a heart attack, were conscious when it was happening, were clinically dead for a period of time, and then were resuscitated, it's fairly simple that one could potentially say, you know, my family was surrounded, they were surrounding me, they were crying, they were holding my hand, CPR was conducted, a defibrillator was taken out, it was stressful. Like those kind of material, those kind of statements could be made by anyone that have a knowledge of kind of medical interactions and death in general. So something like that could be explained where they have some kind of preconceived notion of what probably took place. The other thing too with near-death experiences is that people have these experiences, and sometimes when they're doing scientific experiments with near-death experiences, a lot of the times they do it in cardiac arrest units. It's a really popular place to do it. So sometimes, depending on who's running the experiment, is not always run in the same fashion, which is a problem with science. Everything needs to be done the same way. So if someone has a heart attack and then their family members are there around them and they're having an emotional response, it's really possible that these family members are feeding them information in which then they tell to the person running the experiment. So there is room for some bias, and there is room for error in those kind of stories and accounts.
So with some of that feedback that they might be kind of subconsciously gleaning from their family, I don't know if that's the right word, like, do you think that is some sort of mentally external process going on? Do you think that, for example, like beliefs can have some impact on the outside world? Is that kind of what you're getting at with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that people's beliefs definitely shape the experiences that they have, and also the way that they share their experiences too. So I think if someone already has a preconceived idea that there is life after death or reincarnation or near-death experiences, they may be able to more elaborate on that. Whether or not that actually took place is really, you know, up for them to say. But I think it does depend on someone's kind of interpretation of that.
Yeah, I like that. That's interesting. Why do you think, like, because on your channel, I notice with a lot of these stories, OBEs, NDEs, even the Mandela Effect, I notice in the comments it really resonates with people when you share them. Why do you think these stories are so valuable to people?
I think these stories are so valuable to people because they, a lot of the times, give people the kind of reassurance that for near-death experiences, for example, with there being so many stories about it, a lot of people can resonate with that because they think if this person had a near-death experience and their life had some kind of meaning, then mine does too. So I think it's one of those things where people are able to have kind of a spiritual secondhand experience where they hear about someone else's story and they think that it's applicable to them too, that maybe there will be a life after death for them, or they themselves will have a life review, or just that these things are possible. And especially for near-death experiences where people describe that the soul is departing the physical body, but yet there is still that form of consciousness where they're able to talk to what they may call source or the universe or God or spirit guides or ascended masters. A lot of the times in NDEs, people will say that they communicate with some kind of loving entity or force or something like that. So I think that brings a lot of reassurance to people, that they think that maybe everyone experiences that. And if you have some kind of soul or consciousness after death, that it seems pretty similar to life in some ways. If you can see your loved ones that have passed, or family members, or pets that have passed, that maybe it seems similar enough to life where they maybe don't fear death as much.
Mm-hmm. Explain, you've brought this up a few times, life reviews.
Mm-hmm. A life review is kind of what the name implies, where someone has the opportunity to review their life. So it's been explained in different ways. So it appears that people have different perceptions of life reviews for whatever reason. One of the most popular ways that I've heard a life review described is like seeing a movie reel, kind of when people say like my life flashed before my eyes kind of thing, where they see a reel or kind of a highlight of their life spanning from their birth to their death. And they say a lot of the times in life reviews that it's a completely visual and auditory thing. Like it totally feels real, that you're seeing this movie of your life from start to end. And it can include things that are thought of as positive or negative, or things maybe from someone else's point of view. But it's basically just seeing this life simulation happening in front of you of basically the highlights and lowlights of your life. Although people describe it as being positive, even if they see experiences that were painful to them in their conscious, regular, normal life, they say in the life review that it's not a negative experience, or that they don't experience guilt afterwards, that it just was a different way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm. Something that watching your video kind of made me think about with respect to life review was throughout Christianity, because that's how I was raised, and while I don't believe it anymore, I do think that there's something to this idea of having a review at the end of your life. Now, you mentioned that is when people are going through it, they don't necessarily feel like they're judging it. They're just more like watching the real pass before them. Do you think that sort of phenomenology can explain some of the religious experiences of, feeling kind of on judgment, on trial, kind of at the end? Do you think any of those religious beliefs might feed into that?
I think that's very possible. I was actually raised in a Catholic Christian background.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for many, many years, I went to a school, kindergarten through 8th grade, and church attendance was mandatory and religion was freely talked about. But I actually had never really thought to put life reviews and that together. So I'm just kind of incorporating that now, which is exciting. And I think that definitely could tie into that. And it also makes me think of Egyptian mythology, in which when someone departs and their heart is extracted from their body by the gods of death, and they weigh it on the scales to see if someone is eligible to go into the afterlife or be reincarnated. It makes me think of that maybe there are these different experiences that people have, like the life review, and it's given different names and kind of different traditions throughout the world, like in Egypt or Catholicism, because I think it really boils down to people somehow seeing some kind of review or simulation of their life, and then being in contact with some kind of entity force that grants them permission to enter into a heaven or hell situation, or reincarnation or not. Or then for the people that have the near-death experiences, of course, they come back to life. So I think that ties in those different cultural beliefs that are similar to each other.
Well, it sounds like you've researched this a lot more than I have. Do people report some kind of piece of wisdom or some principle that they gleaned from this life review, and then going forward they completely change their lives? Is there anything anecdotal in that sense?
Absolutely. That is one of the most compelling things about near-death experiences that I think a lot of people pick up on if they are interested in them, is that pretty much all the popular near-death experiences, people have movies, podcasts, books, all kinds of things about their near-death experiences because they are so powerful and they transform their lives so intensely. There's a ton of different accounts of people having their near-death experience in their life review, and in their waking life before their near-death, they may have been drug addicts, they may have been in abusive relationships, they may have been struggling with some kind of thing in their personal life, and after their life review, and after they are pretty much told by some kind of source or entity, basically, it's not your time to die right now. You still have things to return to and work on Earth. These people come away with these kind of enhanced visions of their life and what they want to improve on, and they feel like they have a second lease on life. So that's something that a lot of people pick up on with researching these near-death experiences, is that you don't necessarily have to have a near-death experience or life review to be able to absorb that message of basically every day on Earth is a blessing and you can use it as you wish to improve your life. So I think it holds a lot of value in that way.
Yeah, I'd say so. I've noticed on my channel that people really respond when I discuss the matter of bias, and you've brought that up a few times here. I think confirmation bias is really the crux of what the law of attraction is talking about. What you focus on expands, right? I have a somewhat daring project on my channel. I believe that everyone has a bias, and I don't think bias is technically escapable. Of course, there are, more and less respectable ways of trying to get outside your own perspective. What are your biases as they concern spirituality, if you don't mind me asking? And do you think it's possible for us to escape our beliefs, prejudices, viewpoints, things like that?
I think as human beings, coming from a psychological and sociological point of view, bias is a really big thing, not only in the data that's collected and interpreted, but also when sharing these kind of ideas. Bias is something that is part of the human experience and judgments as well. And I know a lot of people can say, like, I'm bias free or I'm judgment free or I don't do this, I don't do that. But the real truth is that bias and these kind of judgments are something that have been part of the evolutionary process to keep us safe a lot of the time, so that we can make split-second decisions about someone, if we can trust them or if we're safe, or whatever that kind of bias is based on that person's experience. So I think in terms of my own bias, that I do have the idea that these things may be possible. And I say that because I've had some of these experiences that cannot be conducively explained by science about why they happened or how they happened. So I'm open-minded to other people having these experiences, like near-death experience, out-of-body experience. Even though I haven't experienced it myself, I'm more on the open-minded side of the coin. And I think with bias, it is something that needs to be addressed. And certainly in good scientific data, it is addressed, where people, they're supposed to, at the very bottom of scientific paper and literatures, they're supposed to say if their research was funded by some organization that might have some interest in them posting certain kind of results. They're supposed to give a kind of disclaimer about their own bias and where they're operating from. And it's not always possible to pick up on someone's bias. But I think that everyone has a bias, whether or not they're conscious of it or not, or whether or not they accept that they have one or not. It's really something that's part of human nature.
Yeah. Something that you were getting into about the Mandela effect was you did postulate a couple of quantum theory ideas there. Do you think quantum theory can inform lots of these speculations of what's going on, or do you think that the fact that most quantum theorists don't know what quantum theory is makes it kind of a crapshoot? What's your opinion on that?
It is something that is so fascinating to speculate on because all of these things are theories. We can't say if they're true or false. They just are kind of the collection of information that we know about. Like, for example, conventionally, there are 3 dimensions of reality. Time, I think, and 2 other ones that are escaping me right now, but conventionally there's thought of to be 3 of them. And then some theorists will say that there's 10 or up to 26 versions of reality. There's a whole lot of numbers thrown in there. And I think that quantum theory could be a really interesting point of view about things like the Mandela effect. Because on one hand, psychology says about the Mandela effect that it might be people misremembering these events or misremembering a spelling or misremembering something because they were little or maybe someone else told them about it. And so they thought, yeah, I think I've seen that too, kind of thing. But quantum theory kind of points out if there are parallel dimensions and things like time travel are possible, then maybe it is possible that certain individuals would be in one timeline where, kind of like the butterfly effect, one thing was changed, which leads to a series of events that possibly somehow creates another parallel dimension, in which case other people are living in. And somehow, if these dimensions are to collide in some way, that might be a noticeable thing that people pick up on with these kind of slight variations in kind of cultural topics and things that we talk about with the Mandela effect.
Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating. The next topic that I wanted to get onto was the issue of energy healing and human biofield. You did a fascinating work on that recently, actually. Therein, you discuss alternative approaches to medicine. Being a former therapist yourself, you seem quite knowledgeable about Western medical practices. What benefits do you see in both approaches?
So, what other people might not know, apart from me having the background in psychology and sociology, is that I've done significant time studying medicine as well. I studied it in high school and somewhat in my college years as well. I was wanting to do either nursing or doctor kind of work. So I was doing pre-medicine and that kind of study to do that. So I have the knowledge of holistic and Western medicine, both from a medical point of view and from the psychological, sociological point of view. So I can see both sides and how they're beneficial. And I think that they both offer different values. And for example, with psychology and Western medicine, I think it's such a heavy emphasis on the brain and neurological conditions. So, for example, something that I thought about was if you're looking at it through the point of view of psychology and Western medicine, if there is a homeless person living under a bridge, that kind of point of view would say, oh, well, you need to be taking this kind of medication because you have an imbalance in your brain that's leading to depression and drug addiction and anxiety. And we can integrate you back into society if you're willing to follow these conventional brain-centered approaches. And in terms of sociology, it would be looking at, well, you actually have quite a lot of trauma because you were a veteran in the war and then you were addicted to alcohol and drugs. You lost connections with your family. And it's not necessarily a quick intervention of you need to take this pharmaceutical that's going to solve these problems. So it's kind of that. Also, holistic medicine and kind of treatments, I think, is a combination of that where it involves more than just pharmaceuticals. And Western medicine is really criticized a lot of the times for just passing out pharmaceuticals and thinking that it's going to patch up the problem or fix it entirely. And holistic medicine is more of the combination of working with the mental and the mind and the psyche. So that does involve working with people's mental health conditions if they have them, maybe doing something like therapy or some kind of different practice that can help them in their daily life. It might also involve looking at their diet. They might have some kind of nutritional deficiencies that present in some way that has similar kind of symptoms to something like depression. So they'll look at the diet, they'll look at exercise. If someone's not exercising on a regular basis, that can actually be a significant way to help certain mental health conditions.
Hmm.
So holistic medicine really ties in all these different things, and I think is more of a balanced approach rather than just looking at Western medicine and then just looking at esoteric kind of medicine. So I think it's really more comprehensive approach to work with different people because there's so many different kinds of healing modalities that can be done. Like some people would consider things like massage to be a part of holistic medicine. And of course, there's going to be some people that say, like, I don't like massages. They don't hold any value. It's just you laying on a table and relaxing for an hour and paying $100 and having a good time kind of thing. And then someone that is more open-minded or has read the research on something like massage would say, well, actually, no, the person that is massaging you, you're both kind of in each other's auric fields. And that kind of interaction can be super beneficial where their hands are healing you by touching you, and that you're having more of a chemical exchange where your bodies are both secreting more oxytocin and things like that that help you to bond and relax. And the idea that maybe things like physical trauma can be stored in the body. That's more of a holistic and energy healing kind of approach where it looks at that. And something like massage can be really beneficial in conjunction with things like talk therapy, a better diet, more exercise. So it really just works well together.
Yeah, and I don't know how acupuncture is viewed. I know that it's becoming more and more, deferred to in the West. Like it's gaining popularity. I mean, maybe in one of your videos you mentioned something about you going for acupuncture for an old injury you had. Maybe just go and tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, acupuncture has been really awesome. The first time that I did it was, I want to say maybe about a year ago. And I actually had been talking about acupuncture for many years and had read a lot about acupuncture in medical and kind of psychological literature. And so the reason that I wanted to do acupuncture is because in the past I've had a lot of health diagnoses ranging from things like insomnia to fibromyalgia. And for those of you that don't know what fibromyalgia is, it's basically like a pain condition where you feel pain in different areas of your body and can be tied into things like chronic fatigue syndrome, where you feel just chronically tired. And there's just a whole lot of things that acupuncture is helpful for. And another thing that I had treated was I had a lot of pain in this shoulder from a separated shoulder where it was just chronically inflamed. It was acting up to the point where I had a really hard time driving and looking at
Yikes.
the shoulder and just really problematic. So I already knew about the benefits of acupuncture, and I was really lucky that I was able to go to a really great acupuncture center, and they were able to describe it to me and kind of supplement the information that I had. But basically, the idea of acupuncture is that there are these meridians. They're called meridians in traditional Chinese medicine. And it's basically these pathways on the body. And when these meridians become blocked, then that's when people experience pain and other physical and psychological conditions. So the idea is by inserting the needle in the area associated with the symptom that someone's having, that it will alleviate it. And so that's been a practice for a really long time in traditional Chinese medicine. And so now it's gaining traction here in the US, and it has been studied extensively, and they can see that in areas of scar tissue or areas of pain or a past wound, they can see that when you insert a needle pretty superficially, it doesn't have to go deep or anything, but when that needle is inserted, it actually sends chemical signals to your brain of basically saying like, this area is under some kind of traumatic influence right now, like send help. And so brain will interpret that and will send increased blood flow. It will send whatever kind of help that you're needing. So it's kind of a biological marker of telling your body, like, I need healing here, kind of thing. By inflicting a little bit of trauma, it brings about a lot of healing.
Yeah, and speaking about meridians, I was reading, I don't know, a few months ago, Dawson Church's book on, well, his main thing is EFT, emotional freedom technique, with the tapping. And when I first heard about it, I thought, geez, like this, how can there be anything to this? But you look at the research, he seems like a respectable, articulate, informed practitioner. And I know that it is, you're dealing with all these different meridian points on your body. Have you looked into EFT much? Like, do you have an opinion on it?
I do.
Yeah.
The first time I came across EFT would have been maybe about 8 months ago. So it's something that's more relatively new to me. And it caught my attention in a YouTube video. It was by the creator. His name is Brad Yates. And so his videos were coming up on my recommended feed. And I eventually ended up clicking on it and finding out that there is a whole field, emotional freedom technique, where people will do those kind of certain tapping points on their body. And so I was first interested by the YouTube video, and then just kind of by synchronicity or chance, the recommendation for EFT book by Nick, I forget his name, but it's super popular in the EFT community, where it basically breaks down what EFT is, why everyone should be doing it, the psychological and scientific research behind it. And so looking at that and integrating it with what I know about Chinese medicine and just psychology and being present in your body and kind of reworking these certain emotional blocks that people have is really something that's beneficial. So after finding out about EFT, I was really excited about it, and I've been watching more content about it. I've been doing some of the recommended exercises from the book. And this book is super interesting, and it has basically guidelines of how to make up your own EFT routine and how to acknowledge your own blocks or things that you're working on. And I've found that it has been really helpful.
Yeah, and as you were talking about with EFT, I've noticed with Wikipedia, it was completely scandalized, at least up until a couple of months ago when I checked it last, writing it off as a pseudoscience, and all the people connected with it, like Judith Orloff and Dawson Church, as I mentioned, writing them off as quacks and so on. And yet when you look into the research, there's a profound basis to believe that this is effective, So what's your view on that? Like, do you think politics will ever come around to the point where it's a little more accepting and we kind of lose this whole fear of religion and God and all this stuff and become accepting of more Eastern practices?
Yes, I think that time will come. I think that it really takes a while for new things to be integrated into the West.
Yeah.
For example, yoga. Yoga was something that was written off for many, many years, with people saying like it's a demonic practice. It serves no. It's horrible. People that do it are in cults.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then kind of the same thing with acupuncture too. When it first came out, and people thought it was crazy and not going to work, and then as more time goes on and people speak about the benefits and the research goes into it and it becomes more popularized, there's definitely a change in the way that these kind of things are seen and interpreted. And I think it will be the same with EFT. And I think for those that may be doubtful of EFT, they might not be so familiar with some psychological practices. And EFT is something that combines being really present in your body and having the kind of sequence of, I'm going to start tapping here, then I'm going to tap here and here and here. So you have to be conscious and in your body to be able to remember the sequence of doing that, paired with the kind of psychological script that you're either repeating or that you're creating for yourself, basically restructuring your own beliefs. And that is something that is completely accepted by science, where if you can acknowledge the kind of limiting belief you have or something that's not working for you, and you're able to restructure it and kind of come to terms with it as you're saying it. For example, people in a tapping sequence might be dealing with the ideas of feeling poor or not worthy or unlovable or something like that. So EFT maintains that you stick with the feeling that you have and you tap it out throughout these body points, saying like, I feel shame that I'm unlovable. I feel alone. I feel like I'll never be in a relationship, so on and so forth, where people will go through their feelings. And then as they become more conscious of these feelings that they may not even know that they're thinking on a daily basis, they can decide to release that and say, I'm open to having a relationship. I want to be in a more positive relationship with my husband or whatever it is. So by restructuring these beliefs, it is totally possible to do that and to have positive impact with it. And I think where some people think it gets too mysticism or too woo-woo or too crazy, really, is there are certain ways that it's presented that I've seen that I've thought, if I didn't know about these kind of psychological principles at play, I would think that it's kind of magic. Because you'll see on YouTube, there are tons of creators and tons of channels and videos, and they'll say something like, win $10,000 by doing this EFT routine to tap into universal abundance. And that just sounds so disconnected from reality. When in fact, you know, if you do work on your point of view about yourself and you decide, I am worthy of making more money, I am going to ask for that promotion, I am going to switch to another company, I am going to start up my own business. Those are the kind of beliefs that can be restructured with tapping. Although I think if you just look at it and you think, I'm just going to repeat what they say and it's some kind of magic and it's going to show up and it's going to happen, that's where I think the skeptics are. They think it's some kind of magical incantation, and that's where it doesn't have the scientific basis. You know, if like, for example, I won that $10,000 and then I sent you that link to that video and I said, just do this one video and you'll win $10,000. I did. That's where it gets out of hand.
Yeah. Do you think that explains why there's been a surge on YouTube with these guided meditations and things like that? Do you think that explains the popularity of it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know people's intentions always behind making these kind of videos. I know some people are really hardcore law of attraction and tapping fanatics where they think if you just repeat the words and you have the intention of being rich or whatever, then it will happen. And then I think other people come from the point of view of, we can work on this mental block by reconstructing your mental beliefs. And I think that these videos, as the topic becomes more popular, I think that there will be more videos. And I really think it comes down to the kind of channels that people are watching and the content creators, because as we know with YouTube analytics, you get paid more money and it helps the algorithm if someone is to watch your full entire video. So if you're making these kind of guided videos where someone is following along and you notice that, you know, you're gathering more views by making more videos about attracting wealth and abundance, then that person is more likely to keep making those videos based on popular demand. Whether or not they think that they're actually improving someone's life or not is really, you know, up to them.
Yeah, there's always the element of opportunism, isn't there?
Yeah.
Have you tried any of those guided meditations before? What has your experience been like if you have?
Yeah, I've tried them before, and that's where my interest in EFT first came from, was from seeing
Oh,
the video from Brad Yates. And so I clicked on that, and I was just so fascinated about, like, why is he tapping on these certain points, and why is he saying what he's saying at this point and that point and so on. And that's when I found the book. And the book that I read actually talked about Brad Yates being a really significant person in the field,
really?
a source of authority. And another point of synchronicity is when I was reading this book, it was talking about an upcoming live webinar series that was coming out. And it was during the coronavirus of this year. And it's a yearly thing that happens, but they were hosting it online, and they were going to have really popular people in the field. And Brad Yates was one of them. And so, based on the people that they had hosting the event, in talking about EFT and doing the different guided EFT lessons, I was then able to research them on my own. And so those people I think are really great because they've done a lot of work with different kinds of people. They actually have, if I remember correctly, for the ones that I looked up, they all have an actual educated kind of point of view and experience helping people in therapeutic settings. So it's not just some random person with a channel just making things for clicks and views. It's actually people that have devoted their life and studied it and have practices and have really high success rates. So it was really interesting.
Yeah, in another video, you brought up distant healing. This is something I've commented about throughout my channel. Obviously, there's no direct physical link we're able to establish, which might be at play in some of these recoveries. And you mentioned that in your video, but you did bring up some interesting speculations for what might be going on. What do you think explains spontaneous recoveries and some of these spiritual practices where a patient focuses on the location of a healer and vice versa, and they end up with a spontaneous recovery? Like, do you have any theories on what might be going on there?
I do. I think sometimes it can be the power of persuasion, and that makes me think of the placebo effect. And the placebo effect is basically like the mind having the power to influence how we see and interpret different effects. So, what comes to mind immediately is Dr. Wayne Dyer, and he's really big in the law of attraction community. And he also has been influential in the distant healing community as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he mentioned it in one of his books that I read. I don't remember what it was called, but it was an amazing book. And he actually, Dr. Dyer, was able to work with individuals, and he claimed that he would heal them using touch therapy and using law of attraction and positive affirmations. He said that he was able to help people who had seizures or like Bell's palsy, where part of the face is paralyzed. He talked in particular about working with this one woman, and part of her face had been paralyzed. And by chance, she happened to run into him on some island in Hawaii, and they had a connection. And Dr. Wayne basically was able to say to her, you need to imagine as if you're already healed. You need to look at it with love and compassion. You are healed, even if you cannot see that you're yet healed and that, you know, your body has returned back to a normal condition. You just need to believe it before you see it. And so it turned out that it actually did work for her, where she was cured and healed. And in her book, in his book, in another chapter, he was talking about how he had done this experience with someone, with a psychic surgeon. And I believe this psychic surgeon lived in Brazil, I want to say. And he was experiencing some kind of condition. I don't remember what it was, but it manifested with physical pain, and just Western treatment wasn't working for him. And so he was talking to someone else who had visited this psychic surgeon, and this person claimed that all their physical ailments were gone, that it completely changed their life, and that they knew it was because of this surgeon. And so they connected the psychic surgeon with him, and the psychic surgeon basically said along the lines of, you need to take this herbal or herbal, depending on where you are in the world. You need to take this supplement. You need to go to bed at this particular time. You need to do a meditation. You need to remain conscious. Don't fall asleep. You need to imagine me working on you remotely from Brazil to wherever he was in the US. And he was saying, you need to do all these different things. And so he did it. He took the supplements, did the meditation and everything. And then the psychic surgeon had contact with him later and asked him how he was doing. And so it could be looked at a few different ways, because he said that he had incredible healing, that he was completely fixed and free of this ailment. But there are a lot of different things that could have happened. And one of them could be that he had a close relationship with this friend that had treatment from this doctor. And so he already had the idea of, this is going to work for me too. If it worked for my friend, why wouldn't it work for me? I trust my friend. I'm open-minded to the law of attraction and this kind of thing anyways. I'll give it a shot. And then the other idea is in healing, it has been shown in positive psychology that when people have the belief that they can heal, that their body knows how to heal themselves, that they can basically heal, they are able to heal more significantly than people that have more negative beliefs. So if they believe that source of authority, even though it's a psychic surgeon that has no medical experience, if they place their belief in that person is going to heal me, then it's more likely that they will have a positive effect. And conversely, on the other side, they've shown in scientific studies that in Western medicine, when people converse with doctors and get a diagnosis, and the doctor says, you're never going to be able to walk again, you're paralyzed, you are stuck in this chair, that person believes them because they are that source of authority. And so they resign and accept that belief, whether or not it's true. So I think that plays into it as well, along with the idea of quantum non-locality. And that kind of goes to Reiki and distance healing, is that the idea that it is possible that this psychic healer actually had the power to be able to perform psychic surgery and remove this source of pain from this individual. And so there are different theories about that, about basically the transference of electromagnetic energy being able to happen. And in scientific studies, they show that when people are in close interaction or close proximity with each other, that there is a kind of electromagnetic interaction that's taking place. And so it can be used therapeutically, and it has been studied that yes, other people have this kind of magnetic attraction and force with each other that plays off each other. But the problem with psychic surgery is that over a distance, it cannot be studied, especially in time zones. From even like across the room, it becomes super hard to measure the impact of this kind of exchange that is going on. So it is possible that these kind of Reiki healers and distance healers are able to have this kind of interaction with the patient where they are able to like so-called cure them, but we don't have a way to quantify that. So it doesn't mean too much really if we can't prove it. It's just
well, what you were saying about placebo is so interesting, because you also mentioned that your belief is always having some sort of effect on your biology, and that gives rise to the nocebo effect, right? Which is, you know, your beliefs can have psychosomatic quality on your biology, evidencing poor health, you know. And I mean, if that's not LOA 101, I don't know what is. Something I think that's important for viewers when they're talking or listening about placebo is there's kind of two things going on at once with placebo. The one is why placebo is often discredited or dismissed is because people will feel a cessation of certain symptoms, but not actually a reduction of the actual disease. And so, yeah, that is something that needs to be, you got to keep that in the back of your mind, that placebo is not always a full recovery. But then there is placebos where, yeah, it is, people with highly advanced forms of deadly cancers, pancreatic cancer, lung cancer, glioblastoma multiforme, just death sentence cancers going into remission completely, and never reappearing. Like placebos they're often discredited, but you need to kind of, when you're reading these things, you need to get down to what are they discrediting? Are they discrediting the kind of placebo that just takes away the pain, or the placebo that is actually legitimate, that cures you? So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the placebo effect is something that a lot of people don't really accurately know about, but
Yeah.
it's super important in scientific studies, and it makes me think of pharmaceutical trials where placebos have to be a part of the clinical kind of data that's collected, where they need to be able to compare one kind of pharmaceutical drug with the placebo to determine if it's having a positive effect, a negative effect, and no effect. And that's
Yeah.
something that is so important for the consumer and for the person that's going to be receiving that drug. And they will reconfigure those experiments or tweak the drug to make it more beneficial and effective for whatever it's trying to treat. And I think the placebo effect also plays a really big part in the law of attraction.
Oh,
And
yeah.
with things like manifesting, or if you've heard about subliminals, like the videos that people listen to, and it's basically a kind of music, and the person is like whispering things that are not really conscious or picked up, but the subconscious mind works with it. That's the idea of the placebo effect too, with these kind of subliminals, that these kind of things can have effect on us, and sometimes it is the mind and kind of psychosomatic kind of symptoms that happen. And then with the placebo effect, we can see that even if positive changes occur or negative changes occur, it is significant. So it is important to be able to interpret that and what that means.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, none of us really dismiss anymore how our mental state, certainly stress, can impact your biology. Like, why would it be any different if it were gratitude? Of course, that would have a great impact on you developing better health. Everything, heart and brain coherence, all of that. Or you even brought up blockages in your body, which lends more from Eastern practices and so on. I have just one more question for you because I know time is getting away on us. You brought up that writer of the book talking about EFT. I can't remember his name. What was it again?
I want to say Nick something.
Nick
I don't
something.
remember.
Okay. Well, we'll have it linked anyway. And you also mentioned Wayne Dyer. Is there anything else, any other resources that you can point to people that just sort of come to the top of your mind? And it doesn't have to deal with healing necessarily. It can deal with all of those subjects we talked about today, Mandela, OBEs, NDEs. What kind of material comes to your mind just off the top of your head that you can recommend?
Off the top of my head, I think it really depends on what you're interested about. But a lot of the times when I have an interest in a subject and it kind of just comes to mind, like near-death experiences, a lot of the times I'll go to YouTube or a search engine and I'll type it in. And then whatever, if it's an article or if it's a video, a lot of people will mention the book or the article or the podcast where you can learn more. So I think the more that you kind of follow down in this rabbit hole, you'll find the material that you're looking for. So I would say looking at sources like Google to be able to find something. A lot of the times, if you type in these esoteric concepts, Wikipedia will come up. But if you scroll down to the very bottom, it will say like references or suggested material or something like that. And so they will tell you the sources that they were citing. So if you're really interested in this one thing that catches your attention, and then you go down to the end of the article and it says that it's an excerpt from this book, then you can read the book online, you can order it through Amazon. Something that I'm really big into is using the library. And for people that have their phone or a Kindle device, you don't even need to step into a library nowadays to be able to access the books. You know, you can get a library card for free, and really anyone with a device can read it. So I think just being able to search for what you're looking for. So my favorites would be, for the law of attraction, would be like Dr. Wayne Dyer. It would be Dr. Joe Dispenza.
He's great.
I would say the books by Esther Hicks, the whole Abraham Hicks kind of collection. Let's see, the Tapping book. There are so many great, amazing that I recommend.
Yeah, and it's, well, what you mentioned, especially with the citations in the end of books, I can't believe just how much research has been done. You know, like you start scratching beneath the surface a little bit, and it's like there's just reams of studies, you know, that all backs these up. Now, I know, we all know that, speaking again about bias, with people like Joe Dispenza, there are certain things that people criticize and whatever, and that just sort of is more politics than anything. But you know, one thing we can't deny is the research that's being conducted. Look at the research yourself, you know, get engaged with it, and it's amazing how much is there. There might be a little bit that's up to interpretation, sure, but you know, Herbert Benson, for example, I see him referenced all the time in these books, and he's done so much good work, you know. So that's very helpful what you mentioned there, those few arrowways. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you. As I mentioned, time's getting away with us. And I just wanted to mention, until Sunday, I didn't know you were 35 weeks pregnant. So I really want to send my congratulations and wish you the best and a safe delivery and all that. Also, keep up all the great stuff you're doing on your channel. For those of you listening in, I'll have Lily's channel listed below in the description. You can also subscribe directly from the end screen of this video. Now, Lily Evans, I mean, we even ran into this a little bit with Skype earlier, that it's a pretty popular name. So I was only successful searching you through, I think it was NDEs. You were the first to show up for whatever reason. I mean, that's great. But yeah, definitely subscribe to her channel from the end screen so that you don't, you know, she doesn't get lost in the chaff, so to speak, you know. Oh yeah, also be sure to check out her blog at lilytheyoutuber.wordpress.com. I'll have that link below as well. You can also find another channel of hers on Wizio. Am I saying that right? I didn't know what Wizio was. Maybe if you want to mention what that's all about.
Yeah, Wizio is a video platform service. Just go to wizio.com. And if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, it's a website where you can connect with me by finding me, search Lily Evans. And I offer a variety of services. I offer things like tarot card readings, oracle card readings, law of attraction coaching, and different things like that. So you're able to send in your request. I make a video just for you, and that's Wizio.
Well, that's impressive. And that's one subject we didn't even get to touch on today was tarot card reading. So there's excuse enough to do this again someday, I hope. It's been a lot of fun, and thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Derek. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
It's been a pleasure as well. You take care, okay?
Thanks.
Bye for now. Hey guys, did you like this video? You know what to do. And if something I mentioned today resonated with you, click one of them cards on this screen. I have lots of related content sure to interest you. Thanks as always for your views, and we'll see you next time.